Hi, I'm Tim Can. I need a new alcohol stove, and step one for me has always been removing the paint where it's going to show in the finished stove. And I use a green Scotch-Brite pad to just scrub it off. It's not the only way. You could use a wire wheel in a drill. You could use sandpaper. This has just always been the easiest for me. Works the best. I've done this before in other videos on my channel, so I'm not going to make you sit through the whole thing. How about if you go take a look at my cook kit while I finish this up? Although it could more rightly be called a boiling water kit, because that's all I use it for. But every time I go in the woods, this goes with me. If it's a day hike, this is the only cook kit I use. If it's an overnighter or longer, I'll add a stainless steel mess kit. But this is always part of the equation. It consists of the Stanley cook pot, its lid and handle, my favorite Starbucks mug and its lid, and an alcohol stove I made from a pop can. And the things that go along with it, such as this ground reflector. You have to use one of these under an alcohol stove because these need to be thermally efficient. Setting them on ice cold ground means they're going to be inefficient and not run very well. I cut this one out of corrugated cardboard and wrapped it in heavy duty aluminum foil. And for a pattern, I just used the lid of the cook pot. You also have to have a windscreen. These stoves are not very wind resistant. I cut this one out of a heavy-duty aluminum foil roasting pan like you buy at the grocery store. It's 4 inches tall, and this is 11.5 inches long, which leaves this size gap, which I just face away from the wind. To stow the cook kit away in the bag, I'll first put in the ground reflector and then the lid on top of that. Next goes the cook pot with the windscreen wrapped around it. The lid to my mug, and then my mug. And then the alcohol stove. The problem is it doesn't go down in my mug very far. It stops about there. So I've got some wasted space. What I found was a 7.5 ounce mini can will go all the way to the bottom of my mug. So rather than making a stove out of a 12 ounce beverage can, I'm going to use a 7.5 ounce mini. And I also found some other products in the same diameter can, only taller. Starbucks double shots and Lipton sparkling iced teas that come in these size cans, but they're 12 ounce. So let's head to the workshop and we'll make a stove out of a 7.5 ounce mini can. Next, I need to remove the top of the can. This is going to be a stove with an open bowl, a double wall design. I use a brand new utility knife blade and just score around the deepest part of that groove. Not trying to cut through, just scoring a line. It is breaking through. A few revolutions should be all it takes, and it'll start breaking through. Once it does that, I'll use a thin flat bladed screwdriver and pop the top out. This inner rim is now pretty jagged, so I use needle nose pliers and run around inside there just to roll that back. This stove is going to have 16 burner jets. And I like Little Bitworks' method of using what he calls a protractor to get those evenly spaced. I have a link in the description below to his video where he shows how to do this. 16 evenly spaced marks. Let's go over to the drill press. In the video where I show how to make this alcohol stove from a 12-ounce beverage can, I use this drilling jig just to angle the can back so the drill bit has a more square entry point to make the holes. The optimal distance down from the top of the can to the holes is a 1/2 inch, and that puts it up above the shoulder on a 12-ounce beverage can. On a mini can, the same 1/2 inch spacing puts it down in the flat part. So I have a much simpler drilling jig. Just a scrap piece of 1x2 with a couple of pieces of MDF screwed to the sides. It cradles the can much easier so I can drill the holes now. Notice also how much I've got the bit up in the chuck. If a long skinny bit like that is exposed a lot of it, its tendency is to wander around and flex a lot. Now I need to cut the can into its component pieces to make up the stove. There's a bottom that's 1 inch tall. The top is 1 3/8 inches tall. And the inner wall is going to be this shape. It's 1.5 inches tall. Various ways to cut the can. Some people will use a marker, draw a line around the can, and then cut it with scissors. I see a lot of this. Using a utility knife blade stacked on something or in between the pages of a book at the right height. And rotate the can against that utility knife blade to score a line around the can. I use the Tim Can jig instead. And I have a video showing how to make this jig. I give you dimensions and everything so you can make your own. Basically, it's a movable block that's adjustable. Underneath the block is a hook blade. And one of my viewers, Patrick Daniels, gave me the idea that I should hollow out this front face so that it matches the shape of the can better. And I have to say, Patrick, thank you very much. It works very well. I'm going to adjust the Tim Can jig for 1 inch. Hold the can against that hook blade and rotate it to score a line around the base of the can so it'll be 1 inch tall when I pop it apart. 2 or 3 revolutions of the can is really all it takes to score a line around that. It weakens it enough that it just separates right there at that line. These hook blades actually remove metal. They're not just pressing a line into the can. They're little strippings of aluminum down here you can't see. And that should do it for the bottom. I'll reset it for 1 3/8 inches. Turn the can upside down and score the top. Sanding that dish in the face of the movable block works really well. Except for there. That should do it. Now there are lines scored around the top and bottom, and I can use my fingers to pop them apart. What I would think. Might need more. There. Hook blades give you a really, really clean line. No sanding needed. And for the inner wall, I use the remainder of this section of the can. I cut it apart at the line where it gives me a straight line. And the problem with these 7.5 ounce mini cans, they're not tall enough for this inner wall to fit. It's about 1/8 of an inch too short. But good news, the tall versions, the 12 ounce versions of the mini can, give you enough that you can make 2 inner walls. So 2 cans, 2 alcohol stoves, I can live with that average. Template goes down on the aluminum. Score around the template with your utility knife. Should pop apart pretty cleanly. How do I get this shape? I'm glad you asked. In another video, I show how to calculate and figure the shape for the various size cans. In this video, let me give you the quick and dirty version. To make your own pattern for the inner wall of this double wall alcohol stove, you'll need a tall enough piece of paper, a yardstick, a pencil, and a piece of string. Make marks on the paper at the 0 point on the yardstick, at 19.5, and again at 21. Now with the piece of string captured on the pencil, hold the other end of the piece of string down at the 0 mark, and the pencil on the 19.5 inch mark, draw an arc. Move out to the 21 inch mark, draw a second arc. For the length, mark 2 points on the furthest arc, 6 3/4 of an inch apart. And then to make the end lines, use your yardstick to cross from the 0 up to this point. And draw the end line. And then also do the second one. And that is the pattern for your inner wall. You can cut this out with scissors and put it on the aluminum to mark and cut it. I made my template long enough that I could overlap the ends 3/8 of an inch. You may want to check to make sure that whatever overlap you've got, it's going to fit in the top of the stove, underneath this rim, and down in this channel in the bottom. I use scissors to cut a little nick where they overlap. And then I fold triangles to hold that inner wall together. And I could use scissors to cut 2 more nicks and fold little triangles. Again, I want 3 drain holes so that alcohol can drain from this inner bowl to this vaporization chamber between the 2 walls. But I'm going to do it the easy way. I'll use a single hole punch, overlap it about half a hole, and evenly space 2 more notches. Not ready to assemble yet. These won't go together because they're the same diameter. We're going to shrink the bottom using an ordinary toothpick, flat on the table, and then overlap the bottom of the stove on it about 1/2 inch, and with your finger, press down. And that will make an indent. Rotate 1/4 inch, and you're going to do this all the way around the stove about every quarter of an inch, all the way around the bottom of the can. You should get about 22 to 25 of these indents if you're doing them every quarter of an inch. So effectively you've made the top of this bottom piece smaller so it will fit in the other one. But we still need to expand this because these creases, these indents only go about that far down. This part is still the same diameter it was originally. If you try and force this over it, it's going to make one of these indents be a deep crease that goes all the way to the bottom. And alcohol will capillary its way down there, and jets of flame will be coming out the bottom of your stove. So I'd use another can, unopened. I also use gloves. To expand this part of the stove, angle it on the bottom of another unopened can, and then press it on. And that will force it to expand, and it'll give you a raised ridge right here. Pull it back off. Rotate it a bit to a new portion. Press it on again, and you'll get another raised ridge. You're trying to get the raised ridge around the entire can. So pull it back off, rotate a bit, and keep doing it. That should do it. Now we're ready to assemble. Inner wall, narrow end down, and then the top over it, and if everything works out right, it should go on pretty easily. And the dimensions I gave, the top will come down and cover the paint on the bottom. Watch, make sure the inner wall doesn't slip out from behind this rim. And there we are. We're finished. I do one final finishing step on the lathe though. You don't have to. I like to polish up the body a little bit more, remove any of the burrs from drilling, take off the marks from the marker, and I also like to polish the bottom to a high polish. Over at the lathe. To shine up the body of the stove, at my mini lathe I have a jam chuck, which is just a tapered block of wood sized to fit inside the open mouth of the stove. I'll jam it on there and then rotate it by hand to see that it's fairly even. I'm going to shine the body with a sponge rubber sanding block. On the bottom I'll use 4-0 steel wool, followed up by polishing compound. I'm using my thumb to make sure the stove doesn't come off of the block. Bottom. And then the polishing compound on the fingertip of my glove. Then I'll buff it off with paper towel. Nicely polished. Now we're finished. Let's go check it out in the cook kit. Well, let's try it now with the new smaller stove. Oh yeah. Much better. Guys, thanks for watching.